And this is the Human Performance Podcast. This is Miguel Aragoncillo, your host. We have recurring guest Pat Davidson. This is the part where the crowd cheers.
Yep.
This is
Come
episode.
on, crowd, cheer, crowd.
This is
Yeah.
episode
Yeah.
number 3. It's been quite a minute since we've had the last episode. I've personally and professionally gone through some different career changes, I guess you could say. I've recently moved up to Massachusetts in good old Central Mass, now at Cressy Sports Performance. Long story short, Eric reached out to me, and I accepted, and here I am. And I believe some things have occurred as well with Pat. And I personally don't know the full gamut. If you could just give me the lowdown on what's going down in New York.
Well, my position is that I'm the director of training methodology and continuing education for Peak, and it's a like moving forward with Peak Performance. We've got a new facility that will be our projected start date will be April, and it's going to be a really large state-of-the-art facility. We're looking at about 25,000 square feet. We're looking at all the latest and greatest in terms of technology, in terms of being able to utilize stuff like the Omega Wave to program design with, PRI principles to integrate with that. So I think that from a training, rehabilitation, and overall model, I'm really excited about the direction that Peak's going in, and I'm looking forward to really doing my part to contribute towards something that I really believe in from an overall training model and an implementation perspective from that regard. So big things happening down here, and really it won't be until April till we really launch everything. But I think that everybody's going to be talking about what we're going to be implementing at Peak pretty soon.
Awesome. So you actually have this is just my own question. You have your access to an Omega Wave?
We will. We'll have an Omega Wave at the new facility that's going to be at the corner of 14th Street and 5th Avenue in Manhattan. A very busy area. We're going to have a few floors up at the top of that building, and it's going to be a pretty amazing design, really. Joe has put a tremendous amount of thought into this over the years, and it's going to be really one of those facilities that's designed to have flow from the point that you enter the facility. You'll be able to start your day with an Omega Wave reading to determine your readiness, and that will track you into a specific training plan for the day that will be customized and individualized on your biofeedback. So, what my goal is as the director of training methodology will be to actually create these templates before we get started, and be able to kind of put together Omega Wave readings with PRI algorithms and assessment-based training plans with specific outcomes in mind. So it's a lot of the things that people have been excited about, talking about in the field, and I think we're going to put it together in a way that that is bigger and better. So it's very exciting.
Awesome. I always likened the edge of sports performance, especially the Omega Wave. Like the name is thrown around, HRV is associated with it, but it's understood that HRV is a simple component of Omega Wave.
Mm-hmm.
And I just look at Omega Wave like that big weapon in like a superhero movie that nobody knows about until it's like whipped out at the very end. It's like this is what it actually is, kind of thing. So
right, it's like it's got a lot of blinking buttons, and like there's numbers always rolling up, and you can't hit the red button. Don't ever hit the red button, but inevitably someone hits the red button, and it's not as bad as you think once that red button gets hit. But I totally know what you mean. It's like this sci-fi kind of mystery gadget But yeah, I think that overall it just is another tool to use to tell you what's a good idea for the day. Should you go really hard and focus on like reactive elastic principles, or is today a good idea to back it off, or maybe we should try to elicit like an endocrine response? It's just I think that overall it's like you're trying to come up with a plan for a person, and that plan is best put together when you have a lot of information. When you can be an informed decision maker, you're probably more likely to make a very good decision on what to do. And in our field, it's just a decision on what to do with a person from an exercise perspective on a daily basis. And we're always looking for better ways to capture where a person's at. And I think that the Omega Wave is probably, from a biomarker perspective, the most sophisticated tool that's at our disposal right now in the field. But I haven't actually used one, so I've got a lot of specific learning to do regarding that system.
Catch up. Right. And it's just an interesting aspect. You're essentially describing like how to manage the training process, because you look at the collegiate world, you have a coaching to athlete ratio of like 1 to 20 or even more, and having the specificity that you need for individual people, especially if you have like lifting hours at like 6 a.m. to like 8 or something along those lines. It's like people are gonna come in from the night before from going out, and people are all over the place. And then you have the guys that just sleep like bears. They sleep at like 8 p.m. and wake up at like 4 a.m. You just have so many variables, and it's gonna be very difficult from a collegiate strength world point of view to implement something along those lines. So
yeah, it is. But you know what? I think another example of like, if you take the time, if you're proactive rather than reactive with this thing, if you can get into what this machine is able to provide you in terms of feedback, and base your decision making on objective data rather than just subjective feelings regarding what you think is a good idea. It's like, how hard is it to really come up with 3 different templates for one training day? I don't think it's really that hard. A recovery type program design day, a high intensity program design day, and then maybe something in between. That's probably the most likely thing that I'm looking at with this in terms of trying to come up with a good, solid program design for people.
So you're describing having some type of buffer zone. So if I can label it specifically. So you have like the idea of what you're looking for, what quality of fitness or performance you're trying to chase.
Yeah.
And based on the Omega Wave reading, the objective data will determine you can go up or down depending on wherever your readings are for that day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's great. I think that anytime you take yourself out of the decision-making process, probably the better the outcome will be. And like I'm always looking for that. Like going back, I can remember using FMS models.
Right.
And then what Gray Cook always talked about with creating your platoons for your warm-up. I've got my mobility guys in the active straight leg raise and shoulder mobility group, and they're focusing more on mobility aspects versus my stability guys with torso stability push-up and all like different, just grouping people for a more individualized, specific warm-up that makes more sense for them based on their testing outcomes. This is just this. It's the same thing. It's just it's not a movement examination. It's a biomarker. It's a physiological day-to-day status examination.
Right.
So yeah, the point at where we're at right now in the field is a pretty good one, I think, because
I agree.
Yeah, like the more I know about you, the more I can take myself out of the decision-making process and let you and your body determine what we're going to do. It just makes a lot of sense, I think.
Yeah, no, that makes I completely agree with all that statement and the previous one about removing yourself from the process of what kind of training you're going to be doing for that specific day, other than the obvious of like this exercise will elicit this quality. Yeah, I agree completely with that. No real additional things need to be said from my end, I guess you
Right,
could say.
right.
I would love
What's
to get my hands on however much it costs Omega Wave, but for now, I think the things that I'm starting to use, the practical things, it may be if that I can provide for others that are interested in this kind of information is using this, as Charlie Weingroff said, using this really expensive scale. It's called the Borg scale.
Yeah,
Invest
yeah.
all the money into it. It's really, really important. It's a 0 through 10 scale, if I'm correct. Also 6 through 20, and you point at a color and say if this is where you're at in terms of how hard you're working, and go from there.
Yeah, the Borg scale is an interesting one because the original one is 6 to 20, and
Right.
really all you have to do is add a 0 after the number that the person points to, and it's probably their heart rate.
Yeah, I'm always at a 20, so
You're
my
always you're at a 20 right now, but that makes sense because you're talking to me, and I get people really excited. So,
heart rate variability is all over the place right
yeah, you spend some time around me, Miguel, and your heart goes pitter patter. I understand.
now. That's exactly it.
That's it, man. Little snowmen dance along your spine and send tingles up to your brainstem.
Yeah, I have zero ability to stay neutral around you.
Yeah, that's all it is, man.
So,
But you know what's kind of funny, like, and I won't really divert down this road too long. I'm reading the polyvagal theory right now, and it sounds and it is. It's a very technical book, but ultimately it's kind of talking about how there's two major branches of the parasympathetic vagal system, and it's kind of like a more primitive reptilian branch and a more modern neo-mammalian branch. And it's based on evolution, like creatures becoming mammals and having different oxygen requirements and different metabolic requirements. Like reptiles can really chill out and have low oxygen demands, whereas mammals have a high-powered, supercharged engine in many regards and need constant high levels of oxygen to be able to power their metabolic systems. But ultimately, what we think of as heart rate variability is more associated with this newer mammalian vagus, and that one is, some of the things associated with improving what they call respiratory sinus arrhythmia, which sounds an awful lot like heart rate variability, are feeling comfortable in an environment. Like some of the stuff it references is seeing a friendly face, hearing a familiar voice. When other people around you are smiling and enjoying themselves, it causes a bigger response from that particular part of your vagus nerve. So I do think that just the things that we don't mention very often in training, but just being in a good group, like having fun people around you as your coaches and trainers and training partners, it goes a long way towards creating the kinds of outcomes that the Omega Wave. Like we've been talking about. It's one of these mystery gadgets, but everybody kind of bows down to it. Like, oh my God, if you can improve your biomarkers on this thing and your HRV, well, then you're really doing something. And it's kind of like, well, how do we actually? What are we talking about physiologically, and how do we access this stuff? But and it fits in with PRI. Like, smile, enjoy yourself, have some fun, and you're probably going to be able to improve some of these readings that we herald as being so important in our pursuit of being able to improve the performance of people and improve their overall well-being and way of life.
Nice. I think to go on to that idea of the intangibles of the training process in respect to the vagus nerve. I mean, trying to look at the objective data, yes, that's very important, but at the same time, like, from a coaching perspective, if your HRV says, it's not good for you at the moment to go all out in training, or even if you have a game scenario, it's like you didn't really get that much sleep, or you didn't recover, or you had a double header, or whatever it may be, and you should really like sit down for the first half of this game. I think I've talked to many coaches at this point that said they wouldn't even say that to any of their athletes because it would just get in their head mentally and just mess with them psychologically. So intangible wise, like there are some things we should tell them, and other times there are things we should not tell them. So
Right.
it's a give and play with regards to how we can approach this from a performance perspective.
Yeah, and I just think that I know Coach Boyle has talked about this through the years too, of like you have to be a good person if you're the kind of person he's thinking about is bringing in as an intern or a coach.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it's like if you've ever felt like crap on a day, if somebody can just get you to smile or laugh, it can completely turn your whole day around. And we're starting to have physiological information to be able to actually point at and say, hey, here's some of the reasons why. And yeah, it's kind of cool. Like that smart vagus is heavily immersed in the facial nerve and the trigeminal nerve, and those particular nerves are associated with, amongst other things, breathing, facial expression, sucking, which is one of the big concepts of TMCC.
Sucking in terms of the physical response, or
yeah, like and it's associated with feeding and all these things. But the stuff that you do with you're manipulating your face in different ways, different facial expressions, they have direct physiological input, and it's on this autonomic system that we hold so close to our hearts as being really important and associated with your training status. Like how ready are you to train, and how well are you recovering from your training? So it's kind of amazing, but these little things seem to carry tremendous weight in terms of positive people surrounding you who are smiling and enjoying life and making you feel better about yourself.
Right. I've had this thought process in my head for maybe a year and a half, 2 years, maybe my whole life in all honesty, that everything matters. And ignoring any one specific item is just a faulty thought process. Not even just talking about performance, but say, well, I guess I'm going to talk about performance. So say you have like this awesome training plan set up, and then you end up talking to the person, and then this is an actual scenario that happened. The athlete told me, he's like, yeah, I come here 4 days a week, and then on Sundays and Tuesdays I go for a 3-mile run. And I'm like, hold on, where did that come from? Like, you didn't tell me that when we were writing a program. It's like, how hard are you going? What's your heart rate? What's this? What's that? Like, I understand 3-mile run's not going to be the biggest thing, but if you had 3 hours of sleep the night before and then you get the 3-mile run done and then you end up spraining your ankle, then that's a lot of variables that just happen right there. So a lot of intangibles just occurred without you even telling me. So
yeah, it's ultimately a people business, really, and we're just trying to figure out people and give them their best, like give them medicine almost for what they really need. And I think the doctors try to get as much objective information with blood, whatever it is that they can do to be able to make good decisions for their patients. And we're really not that far off. It's just that people are notoriously difficult. You never know what they're going to forget to tell you, forget to mention, and those kinds of things. Like after you think you put together something really well thought out for that person, it might not be that great because all of a sudden, yeah, they tell you like, oh yeah, by the way, I'm also doing this on these days where you don't see me.
Yep.
And you never know what the hell that's going to be, quite honestly.
Yeah.
So yeah, being able to utilize information. I think that we live in this information era, and there's so much information, and like what's the really critical information to be able to draw upon? I mean, maybe we're starting to figure it out, or maybe we're just inundating ourselves with data. but one way or another, I think that the course of time will tell us whether or not we're making the best appropriate decisions for people. Um,
I think to harp on the idea of data, I think the phrase that's being used now is big data with respects to professional sports teams. So if I'm correct, Eagles are doing some, well, some, I'm sure they are, it's just not being said. Um, the Philadelphia Eagles, excuse me, are utilizing Omega Wave, they're utilizing PRI principles, they're utilizing all these other variables that come into play. And I mean, right now they're number one. To my own horn back from my Philly roots, but they're number one in the league for the NFC, if I'm correct. And not only going the football direction, but you have uh, different leagues in soccer, if I'm correct, or different teams, excuse me, in soccer that are also tracking data, tracking GPS. So it's just interesting where the industry is going with respect to how they track data, how they use it, and then how they can modify or intervene based on the data that they already having. So that's just another aspect that I think that everyone's going to, and if again everything matters. So if you ignore this, I think it's going to be something that you'll be falling behind very quickly. So
yeah, yeah, and it's tough. The NFL is such a competitive league, and oftentimes the things that result in you winning a Super Bowl, because that's what all these organizations are after, and
right.
it's so hard to win in that league. But what seems to happen is that it's like you need to get hot at the end of the season too. And the only way you can be hot this season is if you have all of your main guys on the field. And about like from a strength and conditioning perspective, it's still like that number one variable we're after is game days missed or player hours missed due to injury. Yeah. And how can we keep people on the field? And like going back to the FMS type of model where it's like they're consistently sort of quoting this score of 14 is this break point. Who the hell knows really about that? Like whether or not that's really valid or accurate. But we're still continuously trying to strive towards what is the best way to keep our most important players on the field at the most important time of the season, because that's what it takes to win. And I think that maybe we're going to figure out what the most important data is. Like football's a really difficult sport to try to account for all these different pieces. There's a lot of guys on the field. There's a tremendous amount of people on the team. Like what's important? And I guess what you said, everything is important. But are some things more important? Like what's the real critical points that we have to track? And it'd be really interesting to sit down with some of the guys at the top of that level and hear what they have to say about it. But I don't think that they even know at this point. It's like I think that you always think that there's a guy somewhere out there that really knows, and then kind of as you progress through this knowledge game and you meet people, you kind of realize like nobody really knows. It's kind of like a best guess at a certain point, and
no guy behind the curtain controls
that's it.
All.
Yeah, all of a sudden you find out the Wizard of Oz is just some guy.
Yeah. That's just some guy, exactly. I've always held in my own personal mantra or just my own personal behavior or mindset of going to the places that these people, at least on the internet, like the internet is a big place where people can just like say all these things about what they do, and it's just interesting to actually see what they do, because despite all the things that they write and make videos on like this, it's just interesting to actually see how they work, who they work with, and it gives you better perspective, so you don't hold these idolatries into your head. And so it's just a different perspective is what I'm coming from. So
right. So before we started with this live podcast, we were talking about a little bit in regards to some of the breathing articles that have come out recently, and sort of like guys trying to explain like how much time should be to diaphragmatic breathing, and is it really that important in the overall training process? Kind of like this concept of like, nobody's really gotten super strong or looked good naked as a result. It's this new hot topic, and
Right.
maybe it's just that everybody's talking about it because it's new. But I think that you and I share certain beliefs about the value of diaphragmatic breathing that kind of goes very deep, and it integrates into almost everything in which you do from a training perspective. And I'm just kind of curious about what your thoughts are on how to implement proper breathing, why maybe it's important, and maybe how much time you personally do implement that stuff with people that you work with, or how you go about that. So just
Yeah.
wanted to throw that topic over to you.
It's always a loaded question for sure. It's not like, is this important? And then my answer will always be like, yes, but it depends. And at the same time, we have to respect that just because a specific tool is being magnified via the uh, the telescope of the internet, I guess you could say, instead of a microscope. Maybe a microscope, but whatever. The idea here is like, just because it's magnified uh, and it's maybe cast down upon, doesn't mean it's not important. Like that's like saying sleeping is, oh, how much sleep should you get? 6 hours or 8 hours? It's like, I get about 4 to 5. Like, I'm not trying to maximize my specific powerlifting performance. I've realized that maybe somewhere down the line my ability to perform it at the optimal levels of being a powerlifter are way beyond me. I'm never going to be up there with all those 240-pound lifters because of whatever genetics, and I've obviously started very late. So okay, I can cut a couple hours out. So to bring it back to the diaphragmatic breathing, or just the breathing as a tool, or using the PRI principles, if we have a specific tool that we're using, we have to understand that perhaps the person using the tool is not 100% capable of using it. They recognize that they have this awesome like sword or awesome crossbow or whatever. Sorry, I was just watching The Walking Dead. Uh, but they don't know how to quite use it. Like they have all these awesome tools and they just know how to hack. They know how to like get the job done. But there's sometimes like a finer art of recognizing what to do in what situation and how much amounts. And again, talking about everything matters, there are some priorities here that are necessary for uh, using these specific tools. With respects to using it for different populations of people, I would have to say ignoring it for the quote-unquote general population, which is a misnomer nonetheless. So if using it for people, period, I think even these people are even more, they need it even more because they're just very sympathetically driven. I mean, just go to a Walmart or a ShopRite or wherever kind of market store you have around you, and just look around and just like sit there for 20 seconds and see who doesn't look stressed out of their mind, and
Yeah.
just shop and relax. So utilizing these different items. I mean, everyone's gonna. I can quote studies out the end, but asymptomatically, people have back pain and don't even know it. Like,
Yep.
so if
Good
that's
point.
the case, then what are we going to be really going for with respects to the training process? You're training people that come into your gym. They have injuries. They might have shoulder stuff. They might have hip stuff. They might have back stuff. And it's like if you ignore it, then what are you really doing? You're just working with them for 10 to 12 weeks, and then you're just letting them go with
Yeah.
whatever respects to what they're doing because they lost 20 pounds. And then at the same time, those 20 pounds are going to come back because in 4 years they had X amount of stressors come into their life, and they never really developed the independence on how to handle that stress loads. I
Hmm.
use these breathing drills as a way for me to manage stress for myself in whatever environment, whether I'm traveling um, on a plane or not getting a lot of sleep, just restoring my parasympathetic uh, nervous system. So, I mean, I can go off for a few more minutes, but that's how I look at it in respect to uh, giving a general label for we should not
Right.
use these drills. It's important. Like understand that if you don't know how to use it, then mention that.
You know what I really like the way that you use the word tool for this, and
Mm-hmm.
um,
Up, you're lagging.
kind of with. Oh, okay. Well, hopefully. What are the tools that you're used to working with, and how proficient are you with a tool? You know, like there's all kinds of power tools out there, and if you don't know how to use them, you're better off using the hacksaw that you've actually worked with in the past. You know, maybe you should think about the fact that it's kind of a primitive tool, and maybe there's some better stuff out there. But yeah, coach what you are capable of coaching. Don't try to go out and coach things that you're completely unfamiliar with and use tools that you don't know how to use. But for me, it's like breathing has become a very well-rounded tool that I look at as being something that applies to literally everything. So, you know, in order to be able to get a good breath, you have to first and foremost find body positioning. You know, you can't get a good breath if your pelvis is out of the if you're in bilateral anterior tilt, you're not going to get a good breath. You're going to inhale with your back extensors and traps.
Right.
All right. If you can get your pelvis to move towards a more neutral position, now you've got a chance at getting a posterior mediastinum expansion with your inhale. And that's one that will be driven more from a diaphragm being your muscle of inspiration as opposed to your spinal erectors being a muscle of inspiration.
Right.
You know, if you can get a rib cage to drop into IR with an exhale, well, now you've got a chance of creating a zone of apposition so that now you can power a diaphragm to possibly give you apical expansion on the next inhale. And here's the thing, you know, I always think back to the kind of a famous little snippet from the home course study for postural respiration where Ron is talking about, you know, breathing is walking and walking is breathing. Reaching is walking and reaching is breathing. Breathing is reaching. Like, if I understand these concepts, like from a arm reaching, from a femur reaching perspective, from a mandible reaching perspective, and those are tools that I use to coach everything from a lifting perspective. You know, when I'm coaching something as simple as a dynamic warm-up, if I'm doing an inchworm walkout, a classical kind of dynamic warm-up linear day sort of tool, I am coaching that with reaching, a major reach component through the arms to try to create some flexion. And I'm coaching that with reaching through the heels so that I can get a little bit more of a posterior tilt in kind of a quadruped push-up prone position. If I'm coaching a bench press, I'm coaching it with a reach at the top so that I can set a rib cage so that I can actually get an inhale that will stabilize a scapula. You know, it's like we as a community, we like certain verbiage. We like the mobility, stability, breakdown of the joint-by-joint approach to training. We love that. Everybody loves that. Everybody loves scapular stability. Until you start bringing in the breathing component, and that is saying that air is the stabilizer of the scapula. Now all of a sudden people seem to have issue. It reminds me of the same thing with nutrition where people are like, okay, well, you know, diabetes is associated with hyperinsulinemia and hyperglycemia, okay? But we still recommend a low-fat diet. Where's the disconnect? You know, all of a sudden it's like you start mentioning that eating a lot of carbohydrates is what will spike your insulin, and hyperinsulinemia is what's really bringing on diabetes, and it's like, that's a very true statement. However, we can't recommend that. And it's like, I'm just left scratching my head, and it's like people love to talk about shoulder stability exercises. Let's do, you know, T's, Y's, W's, L's, you name every goddamn letter in the alphabet. We're creating it with our arms, and it's like, you know, you've done absolutely zero scapular stability work unless you've gotten a breath to push your rib cage into. So it's kind of like, if I haven't, I need to figure out what I actually am trying to accomplish. You know, Dan John, the goal should remain the goal.
Right.
And as a strength coach, it's like my goal is to give someone scapular stability. Okay, that's like something that almost everyone in the field can agree upon. Then all of a sudden you take that next step and you start getting into the mechanisms of scapular stability, and everybody runs for the hills. And it's kind of like, listen, if you want to accomplish the goal that you are saying is the outcome you're after, you need to be able to get the breathing component down. And if you don't have that breathing component down, you are going to waste a ton of time. So in my mind, every exercise is an opportunity. You know, it's like you don't have reps per set. You have opportunities within. Yeah, like exactly. Like every time you do a set of deadlifts, you have an opportunity to try to do a perfect deadlift.
Right.
That's what you're trying to do. Like let's not just compile crap. Let's try to first and foremost create something that passes the crap test. Does it look like crap? Is it executed like crap? Well, then let's not do a bunch of those. You know, it's like Boyle talks about this, Functional Strength Coach 5. This is on the tip of his tongue in terms of what he's doing. I'm just trying to make things that are not crap and then accumulate not crap, as far away from crap as we can get, and then compile more and more of those repetitions, or as I like to call them, opportunities.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. And I mean, even going back to what I've been reading a lot of some of the PDFs, I guess I could say, from Omega Wave, and that just it all coincides. It all makes sense. You know, using windows.
Yeah.
I think what was the phrase that they have? Windows of trainability, I believe is.
Trainability, yeah.
Right. That's the phrase that they're using, and it just makes sense because, I mean, you know, practice doesn't make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect. So whether or not you have that ability to get into certain positions from a biomechanical or physiological even point of view, that's what we're really trying to train. We're really trying to optimize it as opposed to just, it's like, okay, you look good, okay, but are you really getting what you need to be getting after? So
yeah. And you know, I think the other common misconception with breathing is I think people are just looking at it as you're moving air, okay? And in my mind, it's like, how is the air moving? You know, that's really it. So it's kind of like, it's not just about air moving out through your mouth and in through your nose. It's about creating optimal bony positions, orthopedic positions, so that you can actually have the appropriate muscles moving air. You know, we're always trying to train muscles. Like, right. I remember taking the DNS-A course, and that was years ago now. And one of the quotes that stuck with me from Claire Frank, who was, you know, one of the co-teachers of the class, was, if you want to make a muscle stronger, load it. Okay? And that's kind of indiscriminate. Like, if you want to get stronger, just load the pattern that you're trying to do, and you'll get stronger in it. Just keep adding load, and it'll work. Progressive resistance training is still a very viable thing to do. Right. The question is, what exact muscles within the pattern are you getting stronger? All right? And oftentimes, it's kind of like, okay, you're squatting. We all like the squat. All right, but are you actually squatting with your glutes and your quads, or are you just squatting with your spinal erectors? You know, and if you can't breathe, you're squatting with your spinal erectors. Sure, you're gonna feel sore in your legs. They have to be a component of it, but like, we're trying to actually, it's all the same old school kind of big picture topics. Specificity is important. All right. Well, what muscles am I specifically training? And you can't train, quote unquote, the right muscles unless you've reached very good positioning. And the right positioning just so happens to coincide with being able to take a good breath. That's it. Like, that's your objective marker as to whether or not you've reached good positioning. You can breathe appropriately. And how do I know that you can breathe appropriately? Well, thankfully, PRI has come up with a battery of tests that I can use to figure out whether or not you took a good breath, basically. You know? If you took a good breath, you're probably going to drop. You're probably going to hit some IR. You're probably going to be able to do a lift test.
Right.
So
No.
good training equals breathing. Like I'm going to take it one step farther than just breathing equals walking and breathing equals reaching. Good training equals breathing.
Yeah. No, I agree. That makes sense from the looking at it in terms of like the autonomic point of view. If you're breathing inappropriately, to flesh out the idea of breathing equals training. If you're if you're training in an overloaded fashion with respects to the model of adaptation, you're either overreaching or overtraining, and at that point you have a whole host of physiological factors that come into play, and it just a cascade of events that occur. So somewhere down the line, you need to change those omega wave scores. So how are you going to do it?
Yeah.
You could get more.
Yeah, like
Stop it.
it's interesting. We for years we've been saying like don't chase the numbers game with your athletes. Don't make them weight room heroes that can't perform on the field. Who cares if you have a 500-pound bench press if you're third string middle linebacker? We're still like an interesting kind of discussion that keeps coming back around to critical points. Like what is the most important thing to measure? We've got this you're talking about this big data scenario that we're living in. Well, what data am I really interested in making go in a specific direction? Like, is your omega wave reading the thing that I'm trying to get to improve, or is it your bench press that I'm trying to get to improve? Are they one and the same thing? I don't think we necessarily know at this point, to tell you the truth.
Right.
But it's like the cool thing is that starting to be able to quantify things that were just good ideas previously. I've listened to so many strength coach podcasts with Gray Cook talking at the end on the functional movement segment,
Right.
and just him relating over and over this idea of like tonic and phasic muscles and stabilizer muscles supposed to be acting like stabilizers, so that your drivers and movers can actually be drivers and movers, as opposed to subjecting them and kind of imprisoning them into stable rules. And I think that good breathing is a tool that we're trying to utilize to be able to move your like when we have moving muscles imprisoned as stabilizers, we're trying to unchain them.
Right.
And a good breath is your tool to be able to get there. And I think that if you can do that, I don't know if that's going to make your bench press improve. I don't know if that's going to make your squat improve from a numbers perspective. But maybe it's the same thing as what, again, going back to Gray Cook when he talks about self-limiting exercises.
Right.
Should we be self-limiting exercises to the point where they don't negatively affect your movement scores? Because I can tell you, I can go into massive extension and squat more weight.
Oh, yeah.
But if I own my thorax, I'm not going to squat as much weight, but I probably won't negatively affect my table test assessment to the same degree. Like, what numbers are we trying to improve? What numbers are we trying to not make go in the wrong direction? Like,
I think that one thing that we can appreciate is I can understand where your mindset is with respect to what numbers are you trying to improve. I think having a timeline of improvement is also very, very pertinent with respect to the training process. So, for example, if you have somebody who's training for like a combine test, you need to kind of improve these numbers very quickly.
Yep.
And how many weeks or days to even have. Or on the other end of the spectrum, you have Joe Smith, whoever that is, right? Just trying to feel better, move better. We're not really trying to improve his bench numbers unless he wants to, do that.
Yeah.
But of course, that's not the high end goal that we have for him. For him, it might be. But the thing I'm trying to say is, for him, we need to just improve how he performs and how he reacts on his day-to-day life. And if he's just moving better, feeling better, then I think we've done our job with that respects.
Yeah. It's really tricky, Miguel, and I think that what we're talking about from a training model perspective, I don't think that it's actually been initiated anywhere in particular. Maybe iFast. I can't really say for sure. I've never been to iFast. I haven't spent time there. I don't know.
It's gonna be. I think a bunch of people are going to advanced integration next week, so
We'll have a good chance to maybe pick some brains out there and hear what people have to say.
good old
But
Nebraska.
yeah, it's kind of I feel like some of these ideas that you and I hold to be important, and that it's I love the way a lot of people talk about viewing movement through the lens of PRI. It's like I see bench press completely different now than I did 2 years ago. I see a lot of movements very differently now than I did years ago because of learning anatomy through a PRI lens. And I think that trying to initiate a training model with breathing as a core component, really, I don't think it's been done on a large scale. We don't really know.
Right.
So I think that it's unfair for people to say that no one's gotten better as a result of spending a significant amount of time on these things. Well, because quite frankly, nobody's really ever implemented it
This is true.
as a hallmark foundation point of a training model. And a lot of times people are afraid of things that maybe are new or they're not familiar with. And I'm not afraid of saying things along the lines of breathing is really important, and in my hierarchy, it's way up at the top. And I think that it's an overall piece. Like, I'm just looking at exercise through the lens of breathing, and it changes the way that I look at exercise and coach exercise. And quite honestly, not all of the people that I work with do I try to implement this stuff with. Some people I kind of realize like they're not interested and they're not very coachable.
Right.
Other people that are very coachable, that seem to understand things, I drive that pretty hard. And I definitely integrate the concept of breathing into literally every exercise that I coach with them. An RFE split squat now, I'm looking at this exercise totally different. It's like I use the same exercises that I always used. It's just that like I feel like I can coach these things so much better, and it's literally because of my physiological and anatomical understanding of breathing, oddly enough.
No, that's exactly it. I think to utilize an objective analogy, I've most recently watched, what was it, Elite Athletic Development. I believe that was a seminar last year with Robertson and Joe Ken. And Robertson's, he had a couple case studies. Interestingly enough, obviously I would recommend getting it yourself, but the interesting aspects were how he modeled these PRI exercises into a 12-week span for somebody that's never done them before, and it's just interesting.
Yeah.
This is exactly what we're talking about. Like, this is it in a case study, and I mean the idea here is like you want to lay a foundation. Number one, with that regards, you don't want this to be the most exhaustive and coaching intensive breathing drill with your body in all over the place, like start supine, if anything.
Yep.
Just to understand how to move a rib cage, how to move a pelvis, whether you're in a hook lying or a 90-90 position, and go from there, and then start to educate, because educating is probably the most important aspect, communicating what you're trying to do and why you feel that this is important. And you do that 2-3 weeks, and then once they get graded exposure, once they understand like, okay, we're doing this for a purpose because it's going to help me get to a better combine or help me perform better, get me out of X amount of pain or whatever amount of whatever goal you have, and we're gonna hold on to that feeling, and then we're gonna build on that foundation, and then we're gonna go to the next neurologically demanding exercise for your body. Even if they might be the most complicated PRI case ever, like you need to start with step 1.
Yeah.
With step 29. So.
Right. Yeah, I'll tell you, I just think that a lot of concepts that are from more of a traditional mindset and a verbiage from a strength and conditioning field perspective, okay? You hear all these great quotes that have come from great coaches from the past and present. Think about, like, spend time coaching the warm-up Great coaches coach the warm-up big time. I coach the hell out of the warm-up because if I coach the warm-up big time,
Yep.
I don't as hard because my warm-up is still kind of a patterning perspective to get you to be able to execute your big training exercises at a higher level. I'm looking for every exercise to pack the biggest punch it possibly can. So again, like, you know what? I can crush people with an inchworm walkout. Crush them. Just if they learn how to focus on the right pieces of their body and actually get a breath at the end ranges, both the flexion and the reaching out part, wow, that thing just became not only a warm-up, but it became kind of where rehabilitation and training merge. It became a component that will improve fitness and potentially reduce like all of the negative side effects of like movement dysfunction syndromes that I don't want to walk down with this person, or maybe I want to drag them farther away from if they've already gone down that road. You know, and then ultimately I can make every repetition they do with bench press better by coaching the hell out of an inchworm walkout. You know, like I just don't really. I think that, you know, if I can kind of play off of the breathing is walking and walking is breathing and reaching is walking. Okay, so teaching is coaching and coaching is teaching, and teaching is all about like being able to get an outcome from the person that you're working with. It's not about how smart I am. It's about what I can get you to learn and what I can get you to be able to demonstrate. So, you know, I'm trying my best to give you the right input, the right information, so that I get the right outcome. You know, that's what we're still after. We're always trying and striving for these things, and it's just a question of like and it's still probably these good coaching recommendations. You know, the Boyle thing where he talks about the John Wooden approach of like, do this, don't do that, do this, and try to say that in a 20-second span. I'm not trying to overcoach people. You know, I'm coaching, you know, reach, ribs down, be able to kind of keep your vision on upward, and don't do this, you know, don't have forward head, don't have that. And then I can try to do that in 20, 30 seconds. Keep people's interest, make it coachable, make it useful in terms of the overall training model. It literally is just looking at things from a different perspective. And if people aren't familiar with your perspective, they're going to miss why certain things might be important. You know, I think that's my overall kind of message with what I think might become controversial, diaphragmatic breathing. You know, because it already is becoming controversial. There's been a couple articles, and they're just questioning the validity, where it fits into the model, and I think that's really important, because if people don't speak up and say, hey, you know, I don't know about this, you know, like, is this really important? Then we'll flesh it out whether or not it's really important. But from my perspective,
right,
the way that oh my God, is it important? It literally is biomechanics. Breathing is biomechanics. Training is biomechanics.
right.
It's tactics, it's technique, it's execution.
I agree. I have to say that the things that just might not be getting across to many people right now is the idea that breathing opens up the ability to move in multiple. I don't want to use the phrase multiple planes quite yet, but utilizing an optimal breathing pattern will allow people such as you and I, not even just the people that we're working with, the ability to move within these windows of trainability, I think is a phrase that I can use appropriately.
Yeah.
So the end goal here is like, can we move in and out of certain positions?
Mm-hmm.
Can we alternate reciprocally? Can we get into our left hip? Can we get into our right hip? Can we do all these awesome things? At the same time, we need to respect the fact that sometimes physiologically we need to move move quickly, because if a person is stuck in this X amount of patterning, right? No matter what the phrase you want to use, no matter what the amount of acronyms you want to use, we need to have the system, the body as a whole, we need to have the system physiologically ready for performance.
Yep.
And then there's a ticking time bomb of, okay, maybe this person can't get out of a certain pattern, but they're ready for the season.
Yeah.
6 months. They might get broken down towards the end, but I mean, we've kind of worked on what we could work on based on their psychological and physiological capacities. Next time, they're more appropriately ready because they've had this now foundation of, okay, we understand what we're trying to get. We can move faster through it. So,
Yeah.
I mean, we even use these drills with 14, 13, 12. It doesn't matter the age. Like these ideas of the human breathing is what we're really trying to go for. Like, so we can use this with kids. We can use this with babies.
Right.
I think DNS even targets, utilizing the neurodevelopmental perspective from babies on up. Like that's the idea. Like, we're not just training, 30-year-old people. Like, we're training.
Right.
So
it's just as kind of one more little, because you always prompt these ideas. I mean, when you start talking about what it is, but with athletes, like, they're so specialized, and it's their nervous system that ultimately becomes tremendously specialized. It's like, and it's funny. I feel like I'm just constantly sort of referencing things I heard from Mike Boyle, but he's I've listened to so much of what he said through the Strength Coach podcast, and he makes a lot of sense with me. He connects with my brain, with the way he looks at athletes and performance and stuff like that. But it's kind of like, what I'm trying to get at here is the idea that I don't really like a swimmer. You take an aquatic athlete and you put them on land. Mm-hmm. And now it's almost like they've literally never done anything athletic in their life. I don't know if you've ever really worked with many swimmers, or like, they're just kind of funky, man. They're just different. You're like, are you even an athlete? Like, I don't understand how you can tie your shoes, man. But you throw them in the pool and you can't do what they can do. You know what I mean? Like, I've learned the specificity lesson through training and competing in strongman at a very high level, very personal level. Like, you are only as prepared for the thing that you've been preparing for. Like, these little subtle differences in sports. Football is different than soccer. Soccer is different from basketball. You can't get ready for basketball by playing soccer and vice versa. Mm-hmm. Like, the level of specificity of the nervous system is the ultimate thing with athletes. Like, how specifically prepared are you for the exact demands of your sport? So you really want to go in and add a whole lot of variability to someone that needs a very specific nervous system. I think that's the kind of question that nobody really has an answer for. Do I want to mess with my baseball pitcher who needs to be able to rotate, a right-handed pitcher? Maybe they need a tremendous amount of left thoracic rotation. And PRI is oftentimes a lot about right thoracic rotation. Do I want to tinker with that too much? Well, maybe I don't if this person's doing okay. But maybe I do if they've patterned themselves so heavily where now they can't get out of the pattern that they're in. And that's where, you've got into the end goal with PRI is to get people to be able to alternate, get into a pattern, get out of a pattern, show me you can do this, show me you can get out of this, show me you can do the opposite. And it's like, with a lot of athletes, be able to execute your exact sport movements the way that they're supposed to be executed. And whether or not you're neutral is outside of the scope of that discussion.
Right.
Problem is, if you're now so heavily patterned where you cannot get out of certain positions. And I can just tell you, a lot of lifters are so heavily patterned into extension that they can't get out of it. They can't get into flexion. So you have to have, it's almost the old questions of how strong do you have to be for a certain sport?
Right.
Well, how heavily patterned do you have to be before we need an intervention? Before we need to add a little bit more variability to your nervous system?
Right.
Because you better believe I want a very specific nervous system for a very specific sport. But sometimes maybe you can go a little too far down that road, and maybe we need to back you out just enough. And I don't think anybody knows what that is yet. But it is real. It is a concept that we're talking about the nervous system when we talk about PRI, and we're talking about patterning or specificity versus visibility closer towards neutrality. So how much? No, nobody has that answer yet. But I think that once the person is injured and can't get out of being hurt chronically, well, they've become too patterned, and they need to be able to move more towards a little bit more variability. And if the person is fine, like young, healthy, athletic, doing good, well, don't try to fix it if it's not broken, so to speak. But still give them the tools that they might need down the road.
Correct.
When they get to that point of being so heavily patterned that they can't get out of it. No, that's my mindset. We're just giving people tools that they might need down the road, and I really don't think you're going to do any harm to somebody by coaching them on how to reach, coaching them on how to get flexion, coaching them on how to control a breath.
That makes sense. Just connecting some dots in my head. This is just a random thought. Like, windows of trainability, windows of opportunity with respect to training, period. I completely agree with what you're talking about with respect to understanding how to move specific to the pattern or the sport yourself that you're in. But windows of opportunity with respect to the long-term athletic development, because I'm working with younger athletes.
Yep.
We get very specialized kids, basically, like they're 13, 14, 15, and they're throwing heat.
Yeah.
So they are quote unquote early specializers for what it's worth, because that's relatively young and they're throwing really hard. So opening up this window through variability by accessing the parasympathetic nervous system instead of always throwing heat. If they're always throwing heat, we can make an assumption without even doing any tests that they're sympathetically driven.
Yeah.
Just from a positioning point of view, that you can make that general assumption without even using Omega Wave, because I personally do not have access to that. But if we can improve the amount of movements that they have in their toolbox, then we can make a really good assumption that by utilizing different variables of movements, they're going to be less likely to have overuse injuries. So just connecting some thoughts in my head, some dots in my head. It's really interesting discussion so far we've had.
Yeah, it's just, I think that from my own personal studying of movement dysfunction, and it all comes down to muscle balance, really. Like, and however you want to classify muscles, whether you want to go down kind of the tonic phasic route, or whether you want to go down the Thomas Myers anatomy trains route, or whether you want to go down the PRI chains route, it's this idea that at a certain point, one side becomes short and becomes long a week, or maybe it's neural, whatever it is. Like, the muscles tell the picture. Like, you can't access certain muscles, or you can't turn off certain muscles. You're now imbalanced. I always think back to, Gray Cook's big book was The Athletic Body in Balance, and I think he's talking about the same thing. Like, we push you towards a certain level of imbalance when you participate in a very specific sporting activity. Okay. How far are you supposed to go towards an imbalanced state? And I think that it's heavily individual, right. And I think your genetic components dictate like how quickly you'll move towards these unbalanced states and how quickly you can move in and out of them. But it's really at this point anybody's guess, as we kind of went back to. At the end of it, there is just some guy or some girl, and they're the one that came up with this idea, and it's still a good guess, I think. And the more we can collect data, the more we can begin to pinpoint quantitative markers that might be tipping scales. You know, how bad does your omega wave reading need to be in different areas before we really track you in a different route? How bad do your movement evaluation tests need to be before we intervene with these strategies? Look, I don't know. I really don't. And I'm willing to go out and say that I don't think anybody knows. But we are developing the tools to get to the point where we might be able to make these statements.
I agree. I personally don't as well. I don't know specifically that answer to your question. So I'm only a messenger in that regards of how we can improve the training process. So
yeah. You know, I think that we're probably moving towards the time period because we always go longer than we ever say that we're supposed to.
This is true.
But you know, it's probably we're getting to the point where we should probably think about wrapping up. But you know, it's probably been too long since we had one of these because
we could have gone for 10 hours.
I think this has been a really good discussion, and I hope that if there are, you know, probably one or two people that actually listen to us, maybe they can kind of that we both you and I we're progressing and we're striving, we're constantly learning more stuff, and we're figuring out how to implement these things, and I think that I'm willing to say that I'm still growing. I'm still trying to wrap my mind around things. I'm still trying to figure out how to make things that I believe.
Stop growing myself. I don't know how else to.
You've stopped growing? Well, yeah. I mean, we're both stunted in some ways.
No, I'm just kidding. No, yeah, I agree. I mean, with respect to the mindset of open-mindedness and learning, I think the people that we've surrounded ourselves with is helpful towards that regards. Because being around some type of close-minded person is not really going to be helpful at all. So having the ability to have surrounding yourself, right, again, environment and tangibles of being surrounded by open-minded people is really important. And that kind of brings me to the topic of, I believe, today's Sunday. Was it 4 days from now? 4.5?
Yeah. We're going to be making a pilgrimage of sorts.
Well, I have never been, so it's not really a pilgrimage for me, but it's my first visit, and I'll be sure to bring all of my summer clothes because we're going to Nebraska. I'm sure it's nice.
Yeah, it should be beautiful. I know that a lot of people, when they're looking for possible vacation outlets, one of the first things that pops into their head is Nebraska in December.
Yep.
You know, there's kind of like your classics, you know, the Caribbean, maybe Cancun, Nebraska. Yeah, it's at the tip of everybody's tongue when they're talking about places that they want to go for. So yeah, we're both going to be enjoying the beauty of Nebraska in a couple of days.
Definitely going for advanced integration course. It's a 4-day course. All the other, at least the ones I've been to, PRI courses have been 2-day courses.
Mm-hmm.
And fortunately, I've been fortunate enough to have many of the courses brought to the facility when I was down at Endeavor in New Jersey. They didn't have to travel too far. So this is, in all honesty, this is my first venture on a plane going to a continuing education course. I've never even been to like those big seminars or whatever it may be, like Perform Better. I've never been to those, so this is my first one going out of state. So.
Well, it's going to be. I've got a feeling this is going to be a really incredible experience.
Do you think they have squat racks in Nebraska?
Well, this is that we're going to have to talk to in that regard, Ethan Grossman. Now, working with Ethan is a great experience for me because anytime you have a question about where to go for food or where to go to get a workout in, he's got these things down. Okay.
Really?
Oh yeah, like
All right.
if you want to know where to go to be able to access a squat rack, you don't have to. You don't have to ask these. You don't have to search yourself. It's already been done, and the guy that
What was that?
degree is Ethan.
Yeah.
Trust me. Like he already knows. He's already got it planned out. So
Because I'm on the last phase. I'm in the last. I'm starting the first week of the last phase of a squatting program. So, uh, I kind of don't want to miss the first week of it. So
well, shoot Ethan a message because
hopefully,
he'll fill you in, man. Like you don't have anything to worry about. He already knows everywhere to go in terms of where to get your post-workout nutrition in. He's got it all mapped out. I'm telling you.
nice. Because I don't have any of that planned at all.
He does, guaranteed.
Sounds good. I think 1 p.m. is a good time to stop.
Yep.
We've talked for a little bit already, more than a little bit, but let's put a stop to this specific discussion, or not a stop, but just a little bit of a pause, I guess you could say. We'll reconnect. Obviously, me and you will reconnect in a couple days, but along with many others that are interested in the similar thought process of learning this information. And maybe we'll reconnect possibly before Christmas. Then
I think that would be great. I think that this is kind of like the pre-advanced integration podcast, and we should probably have a post-advanced integration podcast. Because there'll probably be a lot of things that we have to talk about following this course. So.
All right, cool, good stuff. All right, Pat, I'll catch up with you, and we'll talk from there.
Sounds good, Miguel.
All right.